Hello, everyone. I'm Aric Chen, the outgoing curatorial director of Design Miami and incoming general and artistic director of the New Institute in Rotterdam. And I'm really pleased to be moderating this talk today called AAPI Representation, Asian American Pacific Islander Representation in US Studio Craft with our guests Jiha Moon, Joyce Lin, and Shin Okuda. Now, this talk is jointly organized by Design Miami and Aric Company, the latter having just opened an epic exhibition called Objects USA 2020, which is sort of a, let's say, a kind of updated reprise of the seminal Objects USA exhibition of 1969. In this case, including work by 100 artists, including 50 historical makers and 50 contemporary ones. It's curated by Glenn Adamson, James Zametis, Abby Bengzer, and Evan Snyderman. And it is really a fascinating show that helps us sort of rediscover and revisit the state of object making in the US. Now, how you would do a show on object making in the US today in 2021 is of course very different than how you would do it in 1969. And one of the big differences would of course be a greater diversity of voices. And it's in that context that we have this discussion today. Now, it's pretty clear that all of us here are somehow Asian American, but as we all know, Asian American means very different things and reflects a wider range, a wide array of personal histories and identities. I mean, for starters, there's me, who is Chinese American, born in the US, raised in the US, two parents who were born in China, but raised in Taiwan. I've actually been living in China now for the past 13 years. We have Jiha Moon, who was born in South Korea, but is now based in Atlanta. We have Shin Okuda, who was born in Japan, but now living and working in Los Angeles, and Joyce Lin, who was born in the US in Alabama to Taiwanese parents and is now working in Houston. So, we all have our own stories and our own versions of being Asian American, and maybe that's something that we can talk about later. But to begin with, I'd like to invite our guests to maybe talk about their work a little bit. And I thought perhaps we could begin with Jiha, because Jiha, your work, which is really really quite amazing, deals in ceramics mostly, deals a lot with questions of identity and sort of transnational, the transnational movement of ideas and things and people. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yes, thank you for having me for this important discussion, and I'm very excited to be here. And I have been working with ceramic since 2012, and I got a grant to explore this new medium. And I've always had a desire to play with objects, because I feel like, my main medium, which is painting and 2D surfaces, has a limit to be friendly in some ways. And people are collecting objects all around, and they're very familiar and friendly with people. And everybody has a teapot, and they little cups, and they hold on to it, and they really enjoy the images on the surface decoration. And I wanted to include those exciting elements for my, painting in some way. And then I feel like I needed to explore with the objects, and then, how people react to the images on the surface is quite different from the way they see the, 2D works. And from that desire, I started working with the ceramic a little bit, but my subject has been always exploring culture references and assimilation and identity in some way, but I've never considered myself a political artist or anything. It's for me more of observation and trying to see difference and a similarity and how they play in a different culture or different even audiences or generation. So having that conversation for a while in 2D and then move to 3D, and it's more elevated and exciting in some way because it plays with the object wood. Um, so um, I guess colors and iconographies they're not that different from my 2D works, and then they appear in my ceramic work as well. And the audience is how they deal with that imagery is a lot more open and friendly, and then easily get into the conversation, even talking about tea ceremonies or a different culture or like tradition and I guess a more popular culture in a way, and that it opens up a conversation a lot more exciting way. So I've been having really great time, and I hope that this practice continues, and then really invite people to have a deeper conversation in some ways.
Well, that's great. And first of all, I forgot to mention Shin and Joyce. Also, please feel free to chime in or ask any questions of Jiha, so that it's not just me me talking. This is hopefully this can be as informal as possible. But Jiha, no, that's a really great introduction to your work. But maybe talk us through some of these motifs and references. I mean, you have the the sort of gourd-shaped yellow wave series, which also includes synthetic hair, and your kimchi
Uh,
vessel. Yeah,
yeah.
what's going on with some of these?
Well, as observer, I look at a lot of historical references, also popular cultural references at the same time, and then try to mimic and try to twist a little bit. The way I observe people, Asians born with brown eyes and like a dark brown hair, and we do have our appearance, but in this popular cultural generation, people can wear like, blue color contact lenses and dye their hair. And it's not something they're born with, but they can add onto it. So identity is something, not fixed, but it's shifting and changing. And also you could use your own will to, nobody really born with the, green hair. So I really make that observation, and I wanted to utilize it in my painting, and in my painting in a more little bit a subtle way. And I tried, I guess, abstraction in a way that, playing with the iconographies or colors a little bit more complicated, but in my ceramic work, they're a little bit unraveled and then easier to identify things. And then the things that I would do with my color, I would do in my ceramic with underglaze. And often I invite the synthetic hair because that object itself has a history or a reference, direct reference of it. So people kind of make a very sort of like a jump into the conversation. So in that way that I use the brush stroke from my 2D work, but on the surface decoration, I have the same, way of painting and drawing that are exactly similar, but in 3D works, like it looks different. And also something that I would play with the color and shapes, and then I switch with some other elements in my ceramic work. But then when I make after I work with ceramic work, and then those images coming back to my 2D work again. So it's a very like a fun and rich conversation between my 2D work and 3D works. And as you see, I reference Korean traditional, ceramic body, but the dragon's coming out of it. And I titled it Genie. It's like a animation, like Disney animation. Sort of, I reference it kind of back and forth in a way. And then there's an image of a banana, I often use for both my painting and ceramic work. And actually the banana came from Andy Warhol's Velvet Underground album cover design. As an artist, a lot of people notice that, but also banana has a different meaning in, in the generational, I guess, reference. I've heard from my high school student who told me, like, that's the way people call them as a second generation of Asian American who are inside white and outside yellow. And so I guess it's a similar way they call like fresh or bold fob. So I sort of kind of reference that and play with the imageries and colors in my artwork.
Wow, that's that's amazing. Um, I mean, it's really incredible how you draw from all these different kind of visual references, right? And also play with their multiple meanings. But you know, this is maybe a little bit in contrast to the work of Shin. Maybe Shin, we can look at some of your work now. I mean, it's you specialize in these beautifully crafted wood furniture, especially pieces. Where what what how did you get your start? I mean, how what led you to focus only on wood?
Yeah, I was I when I moved here, I started working for different artists as a fabricator. So my background is more like coming from making stuff rather than like designing. So what I design is based on my capability to make. So I design what I can make. So and then I didn't go to like a design school or art school. So my background is a little different. Um, but so the one of the artists I worked for used plywood a lot, MDF also, but then as when I started making furniture, it's just for myself or friends or family. It's just like making stuff with this material. It's just a sheet of plywood. So it's I didn't really think myself as a worker. It's more like using this specific material, Baltic birch plywood, and it's a sheet of plywood, so it's more like 2D. So just like she said, it's a 2D material to me, and then have to make a three something like a 3D as an object, 3D object, and then that was the game for me, like what I can design with my capability and then with this material. And then that was enough for me. I didn't need to explore so much. And then myself, I have a little bit of color blind. So I avoided using colors at the beginning. But I see colors, I enjoy colors. Maybe it's a bit different from other people, but so then gradually I started using colors. So that comes in later. But so at first, just this Baltic birch material, and that's it. Um, so yeah, I think like understanding the materials and understanding my capability. My design is limited by that, but the limitation is not a bad thing. I think, it's a lot
Yeah.
more to go still. Yeah.
I mean, well, the just listening to you now, it seems like there's a really sort of beautiful kind of innateness to your work. I guess in the sense that you weren't formally trained in design. You've sort of almost you work with the materials at hand and work within the your what you feel as though you're able to do with those materials, and that innateness almost, I don't know, just it almost reminds me of Nakashima, in the sense that there was a kind of innateness in the materiality in his work. I mean, this is a bit of a stretch, but this leads me to wonder, you know, uh, having grown up in Japan with this incredible, these incredible cultural and craft and design traditions, how much do you think that's influenced you?
So I didn't really study like now I study or like read a lot about like a tea rooms or the sukiya, the style of Japanese house more. But then before, when I studied 2009, I started my own practice. But then I was not really thinking about it. But I just grew up in like a regular, the typical Japanese like a house. and then my parents are like artists or anything, like far from that. But one of my grandmother was a tea ceremony teacher, and the other was a ikebana teacher. And it was, those two are not so special. Many people do that. But I was exposed to those two traditional Japanese culture growing up. So even little things like seasonal, like when you go to the tea room, there is one flower in bamboo shoot, but it's a very seasonal thing. Those little things, and then here, especially in Los Angeles, there's no season. Yeah, here it's pretty much every day the same. But those little like seasonal things, I just naturally I have, and then just exposed to those like tea room especially. You have to make a decision to make stuff, and that's like just naturally I have growing up in Japan, like then like in the 70s, I think.
Mm. Yeah, well, I'm looking at your double cylinder rocker and your suspension metal lounge, and in these designs you can really see the plywood, right? And there's a real kind of elegance to how you make that 2D material into a kind of a structural 3D composition, really. But then I look at the multi-column work desk, and that seems very different. What maybe you can tell us a little bit about that, because the sort of turned legs sort of fascinate me.
Yes, so I use cylinders like since 2014. I've been using like a round shape. Before that, I was just playing with the different shapes, different size of rectangle, how you put them together. That's how like houses are basically. When you look at the wall, rectangle wall, and then different shape of different rectangles cut out as a window and then doors. That was my game then. But then when I started looking at the more like, especially like a tea rooms and stuff like that, the round object, round element, it just gives really good balance and within these rectangles. And then I thought, okay, I can use more circles then. But then it was not easy to use. It wasn't easy like element to use to make furniture. But I found a way to use. I found like I looking at like a more like a Shiro Kuramata, those like 80s Japanese designers, and it's like subtle, but it's very good like visual impact. And then I started using cylinder, round shape more, and then for particular this table, if in a drawing I put like 3 different sizes of cylinder, but it looked really plain and it was really hard to see the scale at first. And then I started breaking down in the horizontal way. And then if you have like 3 cylinders, just look at it, you can't really see the scale and the size. And then I started dividing the horizontal way and just adding just bigger cylinder around it. It gives a lot more depth and then scale. So I thought, oh, this is the simple way of making this, like not making it complicated anything, just adding rings, the vertical cylinder, cutting a horizontal way. So I just started playing that. Then it just came to this design. But yeah.
Yeah, no, it's funny that you mentioned Kuramata, because you're right. There is something sort of 1980s about about that piece. Besides the fact that it's sort of all black, which actually makes it a kind of shadow, which was also a notion that Kuramata played with.
Cool.
Yeah, well, maybe let's go to Joyce now, because Joyce, your work is probably the least easily identifiable as coming from some sort of Asian American heritage or identity. I mean, tell us about it. I mean, it really speaks powerfully to me of the sort of our relationship with industrial production. But yeah, please tell us more.
Yeah, so I guess just to flesh out my background a little bit. So I was actually born in North Carolina, and then I was raised in Birmingham, Alabama.
All right.
As I was saying, yes, so I was born in North Carolina, raised in Birmingham, Alabama, went to school at a fine arts high school, graduated, and then I did my undergraduate degrees in at the Rhode Island School of Design, RISD, and Brown University in a dual degree program doing furniture design and geology biology at Brown. So I wanted to do like an interdisciplinary degree because I've always been sort of interested in the natural sciences, but having been kind of immersed in art education for so long, I kind of wanted that to sort of inform my work more. So at RISD, I did my my thesis in sort of a combination of furniture and sculpture. So my work kind of lies sort of in between both realms. So I'm sort of interested in deconstructing our ideas of material and form, and kind of using the language of furniture design to kind of make sense of what it means to be a maker in this in the Anthropocene essentially, and in this kind of more human controlled, but at the same time kind of out of control environment, and sort of playing with these dualities of natural, artificial, structure and skin, transparency and opaqueness, in various ways using various different materials.
Yeah, cool. No, I mean, looking at some of your work, especially your egg chair, half chairs, the 1-800-GET-PINK maybe. I mean, not to be grotesque about it, but these are almost like autopsies of industrial furniture. I mean, what you talk about skin and structure, but what is your kind of intent in sort of like revealing the sort of inner guts, let's say, of these pieces?
Yeah, so I think something that's really kind of frustrated me about, like, as I learn more and more about these like industrial materials and processes, is sort of the opaqueness of how they're produced, and sort of that there is kind of in a lot of traditional materials, there's kind of like a visual language of what they mean to us. Wood goes by very specific rules that you have to understand and kind of work with in tandem with. And with more synthetic materials, like plastics and foams, there are also those same rules and sort of those same different kinds of languages, but they're not as well known to the public. And there's kind of this mystery about what are these materials, what are they made of, how long do they last, what exactly do they do. So kind of this frustration, but also fascination with these materials kind of leads me to cutting things open and sort of dissecting them. So scientific diagrams like cross sections, which I worked a lot with, and maps and layouts, which I worked a lot with in my Brown degree, kind of influenced my work in that way.
Yeah, cool. No, I mean, it's really great how sort of strongly your work reads. But there was one piece that threw me off a little bit, because I have a hard time sort of understanding what's going on, at least from the image, and that's the skin table.
Mhm.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so that's the piece that's currently in the Objects USA show. And I've done two pieces that are kind of a similar process, where I'm taking found furniture and using a scroll saw and a bandsaw to sort of peel away the outer layers and kind of exploding that essentially. So what I do is I take that found furniture, I kind of either cut it apart or disassemble it first, and then I essentially peel it like you would an apple, kind of slice it in sections. And this was also sort of playing on this idea of structure and scale, sort of thinking about the outer appearances or the outer veneer of a work, and then also, but then, what is on the inside of that. So this is a table that I've done. I've also done a chair where it was a little bit different. Instead of exploding the pieces outwards, I actually took the skin off and then superimposed it on another form that was mostly a steel armature, but epoxy clay on the inside. So the idea of separating that structure and skin was really interesting to me, to be able to kind of see both juxtaposed with each other.
Yeah, it looks amazing, and I really wish I could see it in real life. Cool. Well, what's interesting also, Joyce, is to have you coming after Shin and Jiha, right? Because we're all here in the context of being Asian American somehow. With Jiha, that and Jiha, please correct me if I'm wrong, but this notion of the fluidity of identity or questions of identity plays more overtly in your work. Shin, with you, if I understood you correctly, it's maybe a little bit more subliminal, right? I mean, it's sort of, you grew up in Japan and that stayed with you, but it's not, necessarily a very conscious expression. Whereas Joyce, it's one doesn't see notions of Asian identity immediately, at least, in your work at all. I mean, do you think that your identity sort of plays into it at all, and if so, in what ways?
Yeah, yeah, so I think you're right. There's not a lot of explicit ways that my cultural identity really plays into my work, and I think that probably partly has to do with my upbringing as Taiwanese American. So my bridge to my cultural background is through my parents, and although I am in a lot of ways straddling the line between two worlds, it's kind of hard for me to say that I can claim either an American cultural background or a Taiwanese cultural background. And in some ways, it's I think over time, maybe those will start to merge into my identity, because I know that a lot of Taiwanese Americans, a lot of Asian Americans, Chinese Americans, etc., they learn more about their culture as an adult, and learning more about things that are not immediately, because you can explore a lot more. So maybe in the future that will start to, I've learned a lot of things now, but maybe it hasn't absorbed yet. But I think that the idea of being sort of my own third thing is perhaps the most direct way that it plays into my work, and that I often don't feel like I fit in anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I can vouch for that sort of cliched phenomenon of suddenly, rediscovering your roots at an older age, because that happened to me in my mid-30s. I don't know how old you are, but that was my time frame. Jiha, you've been nodding your head. Do you want to add to that?
Yes, because as an immigrant artist, I guess I am the first generation of immigrant, Korean American. So I feel that what Joyce just mentioned about the duality, or neither belong here nor here, and it's been my ongoing battle. And I feel that also how other people look at me and look at my work and sort of come to the judgment and telling me, oh, you're Asian. That sort of remind me a lot every day. Okay, I am Asian. I'm looking at my work and, what conversation I can bring to the table. So, but the art is always it gives you a certain freedom in the studio. You really don't think about those things and trust your process and believe that it's still there. No matter what I do, it'll kind of come through it. And I need to have that kind of freedom to work, sort of focus on my own work. But I realized once that is done and the work is out in the public, I also feel that I lose my control, and then it's okay. And then work is its own to have a conversation. So for me, in a way that the work doesn't really look too American or too Asian, uh, I guess it's okay. Like, it has its own identity. And as I guess like as I watch my son growing, and he is half Caucasian, half Asian, but in this country, he's really recognized as just Asian. And he has a opposite problem when I bring him to my Korea to see my family, and people see the differences more. But I guess like in this country, it's a big melting pot. A lot of people have all their specific stories, and the ratio of like Asianness or Americanness or in betweenness, like it's all unique and all come out as a different human. So I feel that my work also sort of honor that, it like some work needs to be a little bit more traditional towards aesthetic, but like some other works more subtle and more like a modern or more American. And I just always try to have that conversation. And I also look at other people's work that way, not sort of come to a quick judgment, but sort of like understand them and slowly understand the layer of their identity. And identity is something really complex, and we can't really judge like its appearance really quickly because there's a more story underneath it.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, to go back to what I said at the very beginning. I mean, we're all here on this sort of Asian American panel, right? But obviously, Japan is not the same as Korea, is not the same as Taiwan. Being, born in Japan or born in Korea is not the same as being born in the U.S. and so on and so forth. I mean, Jiha or Shin, you're sort of nodding your head as well. I mean, to what extent? Well, you started to touch on this, Jiha, already, but we're here as part of an identity that's kind of defined by our otherness, right? Not necessarily by what the actual identity is, but the fact that it's how we're seen by a dominant culture, let's say. I mean, going back to your work, to what extent does this influence what you make and how it's seen? I mean, Jiha, you already spoke about this a little bit, but so maybe Shin or Joyce, please feel free to chime in. Like Shin, I mean, the fact that when you were talking about your work, I mean, you made no reference to Japan. It was me who said, "Oh, you're born and raised in Japan. This somehow seems Japanesey to me." You must get that a lot. And sort of what's your response?
Yeah, when I design stuff, and I don't really think about this sort of feels like Japan or Japanese or anything like that. But now, like wherever you are, like information is available. Even like in on Instagram, you just look through the phone, and then the information I share here, living in Los Angeles, and then my friend who lives in Japan, they see the same thing. But then how you see it, I think quite different. Like I live here, and then so just like we talked, all of us have different backgrounds and then experience growing up, and then looking at all these like massive information, but then you pick certain things you like, and then observe things, and then it comes out. So since I grew up in Japan in a very Japanese environment, so what I pick in my instinct, and like it's different from probably my wife who grew up in Austin, Texas. Yeah. So then yeah, it comes down to for me like myself, to me like what I see, what I observe, and what I output is just me. So And then I kind of enjoy the difference, like being in Japanese, living in Los Angeles for almost half of my life, and then, but still, I like to live like like fluidly, like I enjoy the difference, and then just like Jiha said, it's interesting. Like my son's half too, half and half. So here he's just the Asian boy, but when we take him to Japan, he's like more like American than other kids. So he experiences different. Um, like what people see him is very different being here or being in Japan too. So I want him to like be okay. I want him to enjoy like those like being him, like a different reaction or different environment. It gives him a different impression. Yeah, so I want it to be fluid. Yeah.
Yeah, people sometimes ask me if I feel more American or Chinese, especially since I've been living in China for so long. And my answer is I am whatever is most convenient at the moment. um,
Yeah.
but like, okay, so now we've talked about the sort of the Asian side of your work. Let's talk about the American side. Now, your work is in a show called Objects USA. How would you place your work, in the broader American landscape, or how would you want to see your work positioned as American work?
Well, I go first because I have fortune cookie in my work, and I see that as an American signifier, and it's easily mistaken here as others, like how you mentioned it. Like people see it, oh, that's a fortune cookie, it's a Asian thing, Chinese thing. But then they just sort of have a little bit of taste of like exoticism, like going to the Chinese restaurant, you get a fortune cookie, and they just like feel like they have that experience. But in mainland China, you could probably tell us like nobody knows what fortune cookie were before.
Oh.
Now they know because of American culture. And I just kind of wanted to point that out. And my work also has a very humorous element. And I think that for me, the humor is one of the most important, also underrated sort of aesthetic that people can talk about the something more meaningful and deep and also important. So I often use humor in my work, and hey, looking at my work, you think you're like experiencing something exotic or something Asian, but these are a portrait of us, as being part of America. And so for that reason, I use color yellow a lot, because not we are yellow, but how people call us yellow. And I really think it's kind of funny because we use this color to identify people, but nobody really has that color. And color is also something really complex and diverse. Like, we call people white and black and yellow and brown, but it's way more than that. And it's really complex. But as a sort of like a serious joke in my work, I use yellow, and I have a series of work called the Yellow Wave, and it's sort of like referencing my community, Asian American. But then the seed of that iconographic brushstrokes came from Wittgenstein's like iconic painting, the series of like the capturing the brushstroke in the moment and the calligraphy. And I really thought that how perfect that is. And then it's also referenced like blonde hair, like American beauty, like a Western beauty, how they defined it. But in Korea, people call it yellow hair. It sounds quite different from blonde. And I really thought it was really interesting because we call each other yellow, but like, we were referencing exact opposite. And I wanted to bring that serious, like a misunderstanding or interpretation to the table as kind of sense of humor in my work.
Yeah, cool. Joyce, do you like how do you, I mean, do you see your work as more American than Asian, let's say?
Um,
Or,
I
or
think the
even
answer is
American?
no both ways. I don't really see my work as like really specifically tied to one specific, area. I think because I think the topics that I deal with are a little bit more global in scale, which is like industrialization, climate change, and these ideas of how the idea of making is changing all over the world in a lot of different ways as technology, continues to grow at a ever increasing pace. So I think at least with the work that I do have in Objects USA, the skin table, I kind of want my work to be seen as an investigation into that and a deconstructing of the old and a critique of the new, I guess. But I do think it's really meaningful that that I am represented in Objects USA as an Asian American, especially kind of a small female-bodied Asian American that's not usually represented or something that you think of when you think of the furniture design world. And yeah, I think especially in the furniture design world, diversity is really very important because it's I teach woodworking classes to the community at a nonprofit. I work with people that I'm kind of very self-aware that they are not expecting me to be teaching them woodworking. So I think
Sure.
having that representation is always, I'm always like very kind of conscious of like, what do they think of me? I know I'm very confident that I can do this, but are they confident that I can do this?
Yeah, no, that's totally interesting. And I have to say, if you don't mind, I mean, 20 years ago, when I was much younger, this panel would have been the last panel I would have ever wanted to be on, right? Possibly because of a combination of a desire to assimilate and some kind of idealistic notion that, my ethnicity, should not be relevant to any discussion. Invite me on a panel for my expertise or or something that I accomplished, not because of my ethnicity. Now here we are, though, and clearly these kinds of conversations framed in these ways have become more necessary. Joyce, I hear you loud and clear that your work is not, certainly not about your Asianness. It's not even about your Americanness or whatever. It's about bigger or more global, broader issues. But we're having this conversation obviously in the context of the recent wave of anti-Asian violence in the U.S. And I'm just wondering the extent to which that has kind of affected you and your work or your desire to express different things in your work, and this is for all of you.
Very hard question.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, go ahead, Jiha.
What was your question again? Can you rephrase again? Maybe
Yeah,
a little bit simplified.
sure.
How important?
Basically, how has this recent wave of anti-Asian violence affected you and perhaps your work as well, or affected how you think about your work, or how you want to take your work further?
Right. Like I said, this issue has been always in my work in presence, and I actually sort of want people to see that coming really slowly and figure themselves out while they're enjoying the work and, trying to figure that out. But this recent incident actually happened in Atlanta, and I was quite shocked, and I was also quite embarrassing at the same time, because I always talk about how much I love Atlanta and being here. And this is a city of 6 million. It's really diverse. All types of people live here, and culture capital. And I brag about it all the time. And we have the biggest airport. It's super easy to go home, and we have direct flights. And this is also affordable city that emerging artists can come and, live. And the incident of Asian hate crime that I know been happening in bigger city of LA or New York City mostly. And then when the biggest thing happened in Atlanta, my American side of myself, I was a little embarrassed too. And I just feel like, okay, let's just think about Asian representation and how many times we were on a topic, almost, I don't know, almost none. And what I can do as Asian American female artists that support our community. And have I done anything much about it besides my own work? Those questions I asked myself, and I feel like I want to be more active in a way and also not shy about the way I utilize my contents or technique. And I just, freely talk about it because it helps people to understand so much more about the Asian community. So I'm in the process of really digesting a lot about, and I also thought about, I've been always thinking about why there's not so much of focusing on Asian female artists in the art world in general, besides Yayoi Kusama. I mean, do we really have to wait until we turn the 70s and 80s to get noticed? I mean, I like to, be healthy and take good care of myself so I can make my work until I die. But like this representation is important and we need to be an active advocate of our community. So I just feel like I have a lot of homework to do. And I'm not gonna think about what I have not done in the past, but from now on, I feel like that I need to support my community, also emerging artists, also having a conversation with community in general, whether they're artists or collectors or like art educators or just people in general, just to talk about what we do and how important it is to represent our community. So I just kind of think about it a lot, and then like I feel that I have a lot of work to do.
Great. Joyce or Shin, how has this affected you?
Yeah, I totally agree with what Jiha says. I feel like all the events have been kind of like a rude reminder that how quickly our Americanness can be taken away from us. This is I grew up in America. I was born here, so this is kind of all I know. But just by the way that I look, or it can be all taken away from me like very, very suddenly. So that was kind of things that I've always known. Like, it's not like I haven't experienced racism growing up, but in such a public way, it was really like a horrifying shocker. So I agree that like it's kind of been a motivation to really get to know my community more and learn, and again, like Jiha says, do my homework, because I know that we're all, Asia is very large. We're all very different, but the way that we are perceived by like an American audience it's they only really see what's on the surface, and in that respect, that's kind of what you have to deal with.
Shin?
Yeah, so since I came here, but it's almost the half of my life. So, but then I always feel like I'm living here as a foreigner, and then just living in Los Angeles, very diverse, and I didn't need to feel much of being Japanese or even foreigner. But like this incident, also having a son here, reminds me that I live here as an Asian, and now Asian American, I would say, like, instead of like a foreigner living here. So even like the object USA, that time didn't happen not much. It wasn't on a topic, and so now like I'm very honored to be in the show especially this like panels and stuff. Like as an Asian American, I am like an Asian American, and I live and work here. And then yeah, so these things are like kind of new to me as because I didn't the I'm just like Jiha said, I've been watching like a PBS, the Asian American, the documentary. Like it's very fascinating, and then sad, and then like just the position of being here. It's very different from. I grew up in Japan, just mostly Japanese people. So yeah, it's not just I'm like a part of the Asian American community here, so I like to, yeah, represent like the good way and learning a lot of stuff still. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think we are sort of running out of time. I mean, is there anything else you guys want to add, or what do you guys have coming up? What are your next projects?
So I do more like my it's studio practice, but I work the commission base. So I have like a residential and a commercial clients, and I make pieces for the clients. And then I do my own pieces too. But then I like to have more shows in Japan, and so as an Asian American, I want to show my to like Japanese people. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Jiha, what's next for you?
What's next for me? I have a couple upcoming solo shows in New York and Miami, and I also teach at Georgia State University here, and I want to communicate with my students a lot better and using my power. And I have a couple of group shows coming up, and I'm just busy in my studio. And honestly, it's been a pandemic has been a really difficult time, but honestly, I've been never this productive in my studio. And it's a weird coincidence, not really weird coincidence. Maybe it's just, I don't know. People want me to talk a lot more. They want to hear my voice. So Object US's panel discussion is one of them. But I just feel that it's really lucky that I have that opportunity to talk about my work to represent an Asian community as one of the artists. So I hardly say no, and I try to participate. So it's busy as it is now, but I just feel that, it's gonna be busier in the future. So I'm just trying to do my best in my studio to make more productive, being a productive artist.
Cool. Joyce?
Yeah, I'm doing a few projects right now. Well, one is I'm about to install a public sculpture in Houston that's going to be up for until the end of the year. So that's kind of exciting because that's my first instance of like trying to do anything public or anything outdoors. Also working on.
Where in Houston will that be?
It's it's at the Richmond Avenue Sculpture Trail, which is sort of in the median between on Richmond Avenue, which is kind of a busy street that goes straight downtown. Yeah, and then also just working on more projects, trying to just kind of rev up my studio practice now that the pandemic is kind of starting to move along. Also helping the makerspace that I work at set up their wood shop. So trying to get all the equipment going. So everything is kind of in transition right now, but hopefully, yeah, as things, over the course of the summer, things start to, rev up.
Yeah. Yeah, great. Well, I mean, you're all clearly very busy, so we really appreciate you taking time to do this talk with us today. And it's really fantastic to see all of your work and to learn more about it, and to also hear a little bit more about your experiences. Um, on that note, I want to again thank all three of you, Shin, Jiha, and Joyce. On behalf of Design Miami, I want to thank Aric Company for organizing this talk with us, and also, of course, for mounting such an amazing show that I hope everyone gets a chance to see at Aric Company in New York. And I'd like to thank, obviously, all who have tuned in for joining us in this very important talk. So again, thank you, everybody, and I hope we get a chance to see each other, maybe even in real life, one day soon. Thank you.